Hi everyone, I'm Steve Kep, co-founder of From Day One. In today's webinar, we'll be exploring a relevant topic about hiring, using tech to make the talent search more efficient and fair. Lately, we've seen an increasing use of technology to aid the talent acquisition and recruitment process. As more and more companies fine-tune their talent sourcing process, how can employers find better ways to find, hire, and retain the best and most diverse talent? One of the solutions is the new generation of AI, which offers greater efficiency and the ability to eliminate human bias in recruiting. AI can be used as well to uncover a company's hidden rock stars, boosting internal mobility and diversity, as well as finding talent displaced by COVID-19. Before we dive into this topic, we'd like to thank our partners, Censia and Fairygodboss. I'll tell you a little about them. Censia's AI-powered talent intelligence enables companies to instantly model and discover the most qualified talent for open roles and optimize internal mobility efforts directly within their current systems. In seconds, companies make more data-driven talent decisions, increase diversity, and optimize recruiting return on investment. Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Fairygodboss works with hundreds of leading organizations who value diversity and inclusion, such as Apple, Facebook, Salesforce, and Verizon, to help them attract and hire top women talent. The people at Fairygodboss are excited to partner with us for this conversation on using tech to make the talent search more efficient and fair. And now just a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event. Look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM. And look out for a written account of the conversation soon on our website at fromday1.co. Around 3 p.m., we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, the business journalist Lydia Dishman, who reports and edits for Fast Company on tech and leadership, and has written for CBS Money Watch, Fortune, and the New York Times, among others. So, Lydia, over to you.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks so much to my panelists for joining me today. I'm really excited to facilitate this discussion. I think it's going to be an interesting one. And thank you to our audience for spending an hour and a half with us. We are very, very grateful. I can't see you, but I know you're out there, and I'm sure that you're going to enjoy what we have to say today. As you all know, technology in recruitment is nothing new. The truth is that artificial intelligence has been developing over decades, really. And as each new piece of recruitment software gets integrated into our world, the process kind of runs this symbiotic relationship between technology and humanity. A few years ago, though, it was unheard of to scan a candidate's resume for data, but now it's really commonplace. Machine learning is being used to scan through other aspects of candidate information, like their social media content, facial expressions even, and work samples. That's all in the service of identifying top talent. So without further ado, I'm going to open the discussion to our panelists to get their insight on the latest AI and applications for creating a more inclusive workplace. So Manisha, let's start with you. Why don't you introduce yourself briefly and tell us a little bit about your company?
Hi everyone, very happy to be here. I work for Schneider Electric. We are into automation of energy, and our motto is really life is on. We work to product software and solution to empower the digital economy and digital transformation of other companies. 100+ countries, 130,000 employees, and that's the complexity of our AI talent search challenges that we manage. My role is really digital HR transformation. I lead globally this portfolio, and we are trying to make sense of the future of work, digital transformation, and think more strategically about how to get AI, robotics, blockchain, and other emerging tech into our portfolio in a very purposeful way, intentionally purposeful way, and not just one platform at a time.
Thank you. Kellen, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kellen Baker. I'm the head of talent acquisition at RS&H. RS&H is an architectural engineering and consulting firm that designs space launch shuttles, as well as bridges, roads, tunnels, banks, all sorts of other different entities. And I've just recently joined the organization and been with RS&H now for a little under 2 months. One of the things that I think about when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion is, of course, technology hoping to be able to take away some of the human subjectivity of recruiting. And understanding, too, that behind artificial intelligence or any technology is still human development. And so it's very important to recognize, too, that the broader development behind AI will assist with diversity, equity, inclusion. And if there's not that diversity of thought, diversity of development, diversity of testing, then there could be potentially some pitfalls. But I'm fortunate, and I'll share shortly, of a product that I've used in the past that is AI driven, that really helped the organization that I came from in its ability to assess personality types and really help hone in on that level of competency that we were evaluating for our guest journey, and making sure that people we brought on not only had the technical skills, but the personality to really service our guests. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm definitely going to come back to you with my next question. So, but I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to introduce themselves. Astad, why don't you go next?
Hey. Well, thank you, Lydia and Steve. Thrilled to be here from day one. So I lead talent acquisition for Experian in North America, based out in South California. Experian, I mean, many people do know Experian because we're a pretty strong consumer brand, and anybody who's ever had a mortgage or a credit card or a credit report published at any point of time probably has some experience of Experian. My journey started a long time ago before I even joined the company, when I was hacked and I had a data breach, and I was given Experian reporting and fraud prevention as a way to ensure that my credit was not badly hurt. So it was an interesting way to get introduced to my company that I joined almost like 5 years later. I've been with Experian for about a year, and many people know Experian as a credit agency or a credit company, which is our origins. But the way that I would describe our company is the original big data company. We've had records for over 280 plus Americans since the 1950s. So every single large transaction relationship with a financial institution, we've been capturing that data. And for us, we earn our income and our keep from how do we analyze that data, how do we keep it secure, and how do we help that data to essentially help companies and consumers improve their financial lives. So it's about whether it is about access to better finances, or it is about improving the quality of credit that a bank has. That becomes the basis of experience, that becomes the basis of our business. And I think in talent acquisition, for us, it's a lot about how do we attract incredibly strong talent using some of the best tools and AI available in an increasingly competitive marketplace where the competition for data scientists and analysts is with every single industry and every single company. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So deep bench of experience with data, which I'm also going to touch on later in the discussion. Joe.
Great. Thanks for having me, Lydia, and thank you from day one having me. This is great. I'm Joe Riley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Censia. Censia is a talent intelligence platform that really leverages data and analytics to understand people at a much deeper level and help organizations find the best talent, screen the best talent, so source, screen, rank, to really automate some of the inefficiencies at the front end of search. But the mission behind the company, which really drives us, is to eradicate the human bias that is happening inside of search and really help remove some of the filters that are causing billions of people around the world to be discriminated against for jobs. So we're really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And last but not least, Shakti.
Hi, thank you for having me here. My name is Shakti Jauhar. I was at Pepsi recently, and I was leading the digital HR transformation for PepsiCo. Since I left PepsiCo, I have co-founded and I'm the CEO of a startup called Mechanism Wellness in the employee benefit space. As a part of my tenure at PepsiCo, I worked on digital transformation for HR and worked closely with talent acquisition and other teams within HR. In my view, talent acquisition is a much bigger function than recruitment. It is all about strategy and people strategy. So it is a part of the overall strategic agenda for the organization. I also am the advisor to Censia, and I also sit on the board of World Education Services, and I'm their comp committee chair. So I work with a lot of teams, helping them think through how to think about talent acquisition, how to think about various functions within HR, and how to leverage technology in order to be more efficient and be able to meet their goals and objectives. So thank you for having me, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. So I'm glad you said digital transformation, Shakti, because one of the things that I keep hearing when it comes to talent acquisition is this idea of digital transformation. And so my first question to all of you is, what do you see as the real talent acquisition problems that AI is particularly poised to solve? Kellen, I promised I would come back to you, so you are in the hot seat now.
Okay, great. Well, one of the things that I mentioned earlier about what we found success with AI was in our evaluation of someone's competencies and their personality types. And so one of the things that I remember from the very start of being in talent acquisition, receiving feedback from a hiring manager that would say, not a culture fit. How many times have we seen that phrase? Not a culture fit, not a culture fit. Well, what is the culture that we have and what is the fit? And so at Ratner Companies, where I just left, we were looking to solve for that issue of what is a culture fit. And so Ratner Companies, the largest privately held owner of salons. So there are 800 salon locations that they have. And so our hiring leaders, our salon leaders, were really good at seeing someone's technical skills. So they would come in, a candidate would come in and they would perform 1 to 3 different tasks, a haircut, maybe a color application, and that hiring leader would be able to determine based on that evaluation in an hour or two if they would be a good fit from a technical standpoint. But as you know, anyone who ever gets their hair done, whether it's a 10 or 15-minute haircut or a 3-hour color transformation, you understand that personality is also important. Hairstylists are your psychologists and your marriage counselors and your, people that you vent to about work. And so in that interaction, it was important for us at Ratner Companies to find people with the right personalities. And because we had such a broad base of experiences, rolling out the traditional behavioral-based interviewing model and going through all of the competency wheel and all of that traditional things weren't panning out to success. We were still seeing turnover. We were still not being able to evaluate individuals' personalities. And so I found in Tradeify, Traitiify, Tradeify, an organization that pretty much took all of the psychology and the years and decades of work behind the 5 big personality traits that people have. They have a team of PhD individuals. They button all of that up and they mirrored it with the model that I can best describe as Tinder. And if you're familiar with the concept of Tinder of swipe left, swipe right, and they mirrored those 2 concepts of all of the data, picture-based evaluations. And in 90 seconds, their assessment tool, driven by AI, is able to determine based on how someone views themselves based on a picture and some words, which are at a 5th grade reading level, are able to determine in 90 seconds if someone has the personality traits. And that pits it up against your control group, which happens to be your current associate base. So you evaluate your current associates, they evaluate the general psyche of a stylist or any particular role, and then your candidates, and it all matches up. And it was a very quick and easy way for us to at least get a start of someone's personality and to be able to, from there, have dedicated or determined interview questions based on that personality for us to be able to probe. So time saving, as well as given the tens of thousands of applicants, 90 seconds is not too much of an ask with a 95% acceptance rate, or a 95% completion rate, I should say, of that. And I promise you, I get $0 from Tradeify, but from an AI standpoint, I do value the fact that this was a way for us to better determine, again, that cultural fit, and to be able to eliminate those subjective biases that we all have. Someone who may shine in an interview, we may assume they're extroverted or gregarious, and they may not be. They just are better in that situation. And so, again, I think about all of the things that are out there, but that is the one that does come to mind for me, that I have at least experienced and seen success from it.
Yeah, I mean, in the course of my reporting, I've definitely heard that some of the AI technology does sort of do a personality-based assessment to try to get to a culture fit. So there's that thorny problem. Manisha and I were talking about skills. So I'm wondering if you think that that is a real problem that AI is poised to solve.
Indeed, actually at Schneider, we were talking about digital transformation, and like every other company, for us to be able, even before COVID, you know, this unprecedented crisis hit us, we were already thinking about how to create opportunity to reskill our workforce and also find internal talent for the critical positions emerging in the future. And instead of thinking about it in a disjointed way, like, you know, we had 3 teams. A talent acquisition team was trying to solve inner mobility automation problem, and a learning team was trying to solve a skill development problem by giving exposure to projects. And then there was a 3rd team looking at how to match talent to the key succession role, which is sitting in talent. So when we looked at this problem for future of work angle, we said, you know, here's an opportunity to bring an algorithm which really takes into account skill, talent, experience holistically to create a recommendation for an employee to pick up a job, to pick up a project, to pick up a mentor. You know, really giving employee an agency over their careers. You know, now this thought is not new. The many teams in HR centrally have been wanting to do this. They created performance management systems, career conversations, but AI has actually magnified the power to which this agency can be transferred. For example, you know, an employee is inundated with calls, emails. So if an email comes to you every week saying, hey, Manisha, you indicated you want to move to digital marketing. Here are a few projects which have opened up. Here are a few mentors that you can talk to. Here are people like you applying to these kind of jobs. And this happening proactively. So this was the concept which we thought about very deeply, and we created a gig economy platform. We partnered with our Israeli vendors. And before the COVID hit us, we were going country by country, global function by function, because when you bring in an AI, you have to continuously test, right? Test your hypothesis, test your data sets, test the predictability, the bias. So we were going in a very conscious fashion. And in April this year, when the COVID hit us, we actually slowed down some programs, but we said this one, we should accelerate. Because here, due to COVID, some parts of our businesses have slowed down, and our employees have opportunity to learn and do new projects. And some part of our businesses need more people. So, you know, this talent matching platform was really a great delight, and our employees have really voted by their time. I would say we have 52,000 of project hours unlocked, 30,000 people already onboarded and applied, 3,000 mentoring relationships up and running. So I really think AI has helped us, you know, enable this power over career agency to employees.
Fantastic. Those are huge numbers. Astad, how is Experian poised to solve big problems with AI? What are the problems you're looking to solve?
So I think I would actually divide this in 2 ways. So one of our challenges in Experian is, you know, we have significant high-end recruitment, right? So we're looking at data engineers, data scientists, analysts, you know, people with skill sets, you know, which are so rare that the amount of market out there is very small. So it's about, you know, so one aspect around AI for us that we've been testing out is what kind of sourcing capabilities do we have to be able to reach out to them. So typically when you think about those candidates, they may not be on your standard recruitment platforms. They may not be on LinkedIn. Even if they are on LinkedIn, they probably haven't updated their profile in a long time. And I think what AI and new technology is getting better is to be able to scan through those markets and to scan through a lot of the data, and particularly through new technologies and whether, avenues like GitHub or GitHub or some of the other spaces where they tend to hang out, whether it's platforms, social platforms like Reddit, etc. So, we would say that the first area where AI is making a difference is in that sourcing capabilities, right? Because I'm always looking at areas where how do I make my sources a lot more efficient, and how do we find those diamonds in the rough? How do we identify them before everybody else does? So I think that becomes the key aspect of the first part about it. But I'll share another example, which is also very relevant to how I think AI can help us. So for every one of those positions which are super specialized and with a very small skill set, you have a lot of other jobs in the market, and probably the bulk of them which are frontline, entry level, easy, frontline roles like call center representatives. Now, at Experian, we have a large call center in the US, and we hire hundreds of, if not thousands of agents each year. Now, when you typically put a job out like that, which is a frontline job, you get inundated with a bunch of applications. Similarly, if I go with a frontline, no experience sales executive, I could be receiving anywhere in the range of 200 to 300 to 400 plus resumes. Now, in the past, imagine if you had a recruiter or sourcer trying to go through all those numbers and try to pull that out there. And I think AI is now becoming a lot better. And I would say that we are in trial phases of looking at the first level of tools that can actually do the first level of screening. They can actually be a bot that goes on, connects with a candidate, whether it's on text message or something like that, and just get some initial information to see whether this candidate is worthwhile and even worth going to the next stage before we bring in human interaction. And I think that for us in the talent acquisition, world, we are under the same cost pressures that our business peers face, right? So for us, it's about how do we become a lot more efficient with our human talent and put them to do the job they do around judging and, having capacity to assess, and leave the kind of the first level interactions to areas like AI. So those would be two things that really stand out for us at Experian.
Thank you. So we've got personality assessments, culture fit, we've got skills, and we've got sourcing. So Shakti, I'm coming to you now to ask you how an HR professional, since you have your fingers in many pies here, how does someone determine if the tools they're using are drawing from the best data sets to tackle each of those three problems?
Let me say this slightly differently. I think it is really important, and I mentioned this earlier, to look at talent acquisition as a strategic function that aligns with the business needs of the organization. When I think of a strategy, you need to think about 4 buckets, right? There is a supply bucket, which basically talks about understanding what you have currently and understanding what is available in the market currently. The second is the demand bucket, where you try and figure out what is it that the organization needs in the short term and in the long term. And what kind of skill sets do we have? What kind of skill sets do we need going forward? And that is all tied to the business strategy. And then determine the gap that you have. And then from there, you need to figure out how are you going to address that gap given what you've learned with that analysis with those 3 buckets. And once you analyze that and you understand what you need, you can buy the talent, you can build the talent. It is something that you need to decide. Once you've decided that, that is when you need to think about how do I use the right technology to then close that gap? Because it may not be one thing. I work closely with Censia, and I'm sure Joe will talk about the strategy that they adopt. But at the end of the day, it is really important to think about spending more and more time in doing the strategic work than trying to go find talent, because finding talent is getting easier with AI everyday basis. Writing job descriptions for Manisha for 300,000 employees or PepsiCo for 300,000 employees, which changes every day, is literally impossible. And so you have to continue to think about what is the best way to find the talent. What are the AI technologies out there like Censia and others who can bring in that funnel and allow you to quickly distill as to what you need, whether they are sitting inside your organization or they're sitting outside your organization, and bring it together with all that intelligence that you build and figure out how to do that talent acquisition strategy. So in my view, I think it's a holistic approach that someone needs to think about rather than pieces of this puzzle. And the only other thing I would add is, the only two other things I would add is using AI can really help you remove the bias. And it depends on how you go about doing that AI. And the third piece is, and the second piece is the OFCCP compliance. There's regulatory bodies across the globe, and I'm sure Manisha deals with it. I'm not sure how much Experian deals with it, but you know, OFCCP is a big kahuna in people's bucket, and they look at this really carefully, especially if you have blue collar workers. And you have to really be clear and demonstrate that you're not being biased. And so the AI technologies can help you in all of these fronts, plus the strategic initiatives that I was talking about. So that's how I would kind of characterize that.
Thank you. I'm sure all the HR people in the audience are taking notes because that's important to think about things holistically and best practices. But I'm glad you brought up the bit about bias because AI is only as good as the data sets that go in. And theoretically, bias is eliminated because there isn't a human component, but humans actually have to input the data. They have to select the data. So Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot here and say, is it fair to say that AI can truly eliminate bias?
It's a great question, Lydia. I think AI has a huge opportunity to eliminate bias in certain parts of the hiring process. And that's really one of the key important notes. Censia looked at, you know, the mass amount of people data. Unfortunately, HR has been hit over the last 25 years with more data than they ever imagined. Technologies that were built 25 years ago were great. They never in a million years thought we would have so much information to evaluate. And because we're all humans, we create these ways of filtering through that mass amounts of data. Just last year alone, before COVID, before there are 30 million unemployed Americans, we received 12 billion resumes in 5 million companies in the United States alone. Now, to come up with a way to filter through that huge amount of data, humans have come up with filters. And those filters, a lot of the time, are very biased. They center around things like ethnicity or gender in the worst cases. Sometimes they center around schools, which is very popular, or did you work at a Fortune 500 company? So, you know, Ivy League schools, Fortune 500 companies, and then the whole world is going, there's no talent available. Well, the reality is that those are not the things that determine success in a candidate. There's lots of studies that say that where someone went to school does not predict if they're successful or not. There's lots of reasons why someone worked at a company in whatever role they were in, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're great. But we looked at it and said, wow, every technology that talent's been given relies on keywords. And what excites me the most is that AI has the ability to insert a very different level of understanding this data so that we can start surfacing candidates that have been hidden behind these filters and really help organizations find the absolute best talent from the front end. So we said, let's, instead of looking at people based on keywords, you know, everyone on this webinar, think about yourself. I think we're all more than our keywords. We're all more than where we went to school. We're all more than the few skills that we've put on LinkedIn. We're all more than the companies that we've worked at. We're a very intricate person. We have all this interconnectivity across those things. And so what we looked at was saying, let's put math and science to the mass amounts of data that's out there. And let's look at where we find these patterns in people. What we uncovered was actually that you could find incredibly strong talent that never would fit into the filters prior and really knock the organization on their feet when it comes to the quality of talent. And we're doing that really fast. And so what excites me about AI is the productivity gained in the front end of recruiting, especially, you know, to source great talent, it takes on average about 33 hours for most companies. To filter through inbound applicants, it takes on average about 20 hours, and that's for anywhere between 250 to 300 applicants. Well, we have clients that receive 625,000 applicants a month. We have companies that have to source tens of thousands of people a week. There's zero chance that they can dedicate that amount of time, or anyone can dedicate that amount of time to screening through people or typing keywords on search platforms. Instead, we looked at it and said, let's give them back that time to become more strategic in the organization, and also to not have to do so much hands-on keyboard. So that's what excites me. And also the amount of hidden talent, or talent that was prior hidden, that we've been able to uncover, which naturally leads to a much more diverse talent pool on the front end. So that when you put them through those assessment platforms, you're really assessing the right kind of candidates that are already diverse, versus trying to use filters in the front end and then having a small, diverse population of people.
So yes, it can eliminate bias.
I believe it can. Well, I believe it can in what area we focus on. I think it's very hard to eliminate bias when there's humans involved, because we all have bias. I love you. This is one of my favorite examples is when I say the word or the name Bernie Madoff, everyone on this call just knew exactly. We had a negative feeling. It was bad. Well, there's over 1,000 candidates that are named Bernie Madoff in America that are applying to jobs right now that are not the Bernie Madoff. And we just have this bias. It's just humans. It's how we've gone through life. It's why we're great, but it's also why we sometimes lead into problems when it comes to sourcing, so, or screening or whatnot. So I'm really excited about the front end for sure. I also think when you have a great diverse pool of people applying to companies, or when you have a diverse pipeline of talent, that naturally the candidates that get interviewed are going to be more diverse. And if that can be a 50-50 diversity, you're going to really naturally lead the organization to pick the more diverse talent. If that's a goal of the organization, is to insert diversity, focus on a 50-50 pool of people that are interviewed, and that will naturally happen by hiring managers.
I want to pause briefly here because we are at the half-hour mark. Bring Steve back on for station ID.
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to remind anyone joining our webinar in midstream that we're from day one, and we're exploring using tech to make the talent search more efficient and fair. Our sponsors are Censia and Fairygodboss. As a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time, and we will answer as many as we can during the Q&A session. By the way, there are a lot of Steve Keps out there, queuing off of what Joe said. I keep a close eye on them. I really care about the brand name. So thanks for bringing that up. Back to you, Lydia.
Thank you so much. And, you know, if I wasn't a reporter, I wouldn't ordinarily be Googling myself, just, you know, as a regular human, but I do every so often. And I can tell you that the first 13,000 hits are the one and only that you see right here. So I really hope I'm making a good impression for any of those other Lydia Dishmans who might be out there. You know, the brand is strong. So I want to talk about strategy again, that Shakti brought up, and talk about how you come up with a strategy. How do you come up with a holistic strategy in order to use these tools to make your workplace more inclusive? Manisha, I want to start with you on that one.
It's a very important point to be very strategic and intentional about choosing tools and technology, then also the problems that you can solve, right? Like the way we heard from panel, each person, there is some critical problem in context of our business and its operation within talent acquisition or talent search, which is important for us to solve. So I will talk in context of Schneider. We were an electrical manufacturing company working towards becoming more digital solution providers for automation of energy for our customers. That means our DNA within the organization in terms of skills, capabilities, needs to become more and more digital. So the kind of talent that Astad was talking about for Experian, more data scientists, more data engineers, more cloud, mobile, AI people, we need more and more. And then once we have the business vision very clear, where we are heading in terms of business model, what skills and capabilities we need to get to that model, then within that skills and capabilities that Shakti was bringing, you know, what are we going to build? What are we going to buy? And so whom are we going to upskill? What is it possible to upskill for? What is it not possible to upskill for? And then basis that, we look at our people strategy game plan. And within people strategy game plan, talent strategy is a very critical piece, because the advantage for capital markets, innovation is all gone. The insights and information is available. Technology has democratized it. Talent is the key differentiator. So then within talent, we look at, the diversity, because in Schneider employee value proposition, we have 3 pillars: purposeful, inclusive, and empowered. So inclusive is a given if you're an employee at Schneider, and it's a promise from us to the world that, we are an inclusive company. So we look at our pipeline at all levels. When we are sourcing, are we being inclusive? Are we hitting all diverse candidates? Are they coming into a pool? When we are screening at each stage of hiring, do we have enough diverse candidate? And then within our organization, when we look at our talent pipeline and critical roles, is there enough diversity across all? And to be able to do this, we look at this pipeline strategically through the lens of AI and data. And then also when we look at bias detection, or when we look at fairness of algorithm that we use at different stages, we look the same context, same metrics are applied. Are we getting this kind of diverse set, diverse outcome at every level? And so that's how we build our strategy and keep it intact. And our tools choices are also in context of the vendors who can help us. For example, this OTM platform, Open Talent Market platform that I talked about, when we were in initial stages of validation, whether we should take this tool or not, we were looking at the training data set. Does their training data set take a data only from one region of the world or all region of the world? Does that training data set include all kind of diversity that we're looking at? How they are measuring it, how often they are measuring it, because even that data set is dynamic. And then when we brought them in at the POC, proof of concept level, when we give them our test data set, we ensure that our template has all these diverse use cases that we care about. And then we made that as a basis of evaluation. Also, it's not one time done. We also ask them to self-audit and report, plus we audit this on a regular basis.
Thank you. Astad, where does the strategy come from? Is that a top-down thing at Experian?
So I would definitely say, we do follow a business strategy, right? So at the highest level for us, I think we are grounded in the business strategy. But I'll also put up something in our world. A couple of years back, and I'm going to mention our competitor's name as well, right? We were a beautiful industry. We've been there 45 years. Things have been working well. And all of a sudden, and we had a beautiful business called, our credit services, where people would come and sign up and get credit reports, right? And they would pay us a certain amount of money. In this disruptive world that we live in, Credit Karma emerged. And I'm sure many of you might have seen the advertisements. And Credit Karma came up with a simple premise, which said, free credit reports. Overnight, we went from almost $1 billion of business, revenue generating consumer business, to zero. And we had to reinvent ourselves of what that means. And how do we now provide value to customers in a place where they're just getting something for free? Now, that kind of disruption is something I think a lot of our companies and industries are facing consistently, right? So this whole thing of a beautiful business strategy that is 5 years locked in, nothing's going to happen and move through. I think we've moved away from that world. I wish our world was that consistent. I mean, even the COVID crisis right now proves you had all these airline industries and hotel chains, and they were thinking about expansion and putting up new buildings and buying new aircraft. And guess what? 3 months later, they're like, everything is canceled. So I think we live in an extremely dynamic, disruptive world where we're actually a bit paranoid about how do we keep ourselves at the top end of it. One aspect that has started to work really well in Experian, for example, is what we call an agile framework. Now, I think most people in the software industry know about the agile framework pretty well. But agile is this framework which is about create quickly, fail, keep building on, build on dynamically, and don't wait for this perfect project plan. So you don't have this 6-month project plan, somebody's going to create a template, somebody's going to do this. Literally you're building the product from the day you talk about it, and then you test it out immediately, and you It will be a crappy product and you will fail and then you'll continue to invent it, etc. I would say that this has been an approach now that we started to take in talent acquisition as well, right? So we say there is nothing in talent acquisition that doesn't have the same thing. So for us, an example, as you talk about some of these AI tools, right? For example, so like, I mean, one tool that we use a lot around diversity hiring is Seek Out, right? And for us, we're not going to put a project proposal and put that through. You were like, okay, let's experiment with Seek Out. You know, we put in a license, we grab a couple of licenses, now start doing an A/B test. You know, do recruiters with Seek Out bring in more diverse candidates than recruiters who do not use Seek Out? For us, it's that invention on the fly. If there's a good idea, for me and my team, it's about implementing it within 30 to 60 days and then seeing whether we want to stay on with it or move on to something else. So I think more and more companies are getting into that cycle where you don't think about TA strategies as like, you know, a long-term plan. I mean, I will tell you, I cannot tell you how many hours of my life I wasted on a workforce planning strategy and a tool, only to have that completely disrupted in 6 months, right? And all, you know, I've got like 100-page decks which are sitting and, you know, becoming like monitor stacks or something like that. So for me, it's that whole sense of really, really what the business is going to react quickly to the environment. And we need to be able to build an infrastructure that reacts as quickly and be able to invent on the fly. We're not going to be able to pause something in order to do something different. You know, it's got to happen concurrently. So it may not be the exact answer you're looking at, but hopefully that has a different perspective.
No, that's great. Thank you. Because it is all about strategy. Kellen, you initially mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is that baked into your strategy from the beginning when you're doing talent acquisition, when you are hiring?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely something, especially in the industry that I've just recently joined, and recognizing, you know, in the architectural space, the engineering space, it is not as diverse as you would want it to be. And I think everyone could likely say that. And what is diversity? Of course, you have all sorts of different governmental boxes that you can classify, but on the surface, where we're trying to get to at the end is that diversity of thought. Our line of work at RS&H is really around movement, if you think about it. If I can come up with one word. So when we're having individuals design bridges, roads, and tunnels, it's about movement. If you're designing a bank or a hospital, it's about efficient movement in those spaces. A launch pad for space, it's about movement. And so we're constantly thinking about the perspectives that are at the table, and those life experiences that weave into people's design aesthetics, and how that can really help us launch to the next level. So diversity, equity, inclusion is a part of our design, our strategy. It's something that is top down, it's across, it's bottom up. It's something that is a value of ours, not a priority. And I think it's very important to distinguish that. But it's also important to get beyond, when you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, to get beyond, oh, we need a training, or, oh, there's a lot of things going on in the news, so we need a statement. We need to update our website with a phrase or a tagline, or we need to hashtag this and do that. You have to be mindful, I think, from a talent acquisition standpoint too, that again, if it's a value, it's a long-standing thing. It's not a someone asked me, I was talking to one of our practice directors, and he was like, well, when are we going to get there? And I was like, I don't know where there is even at, and I definitely have no timeline behind that. And I think there's some education around that. And so yes, diversity, equity, inclusion is part of our strategy, but it's also important to make it a value, so that there aren't the flavor of the months and initiatives that kind of fall by the wayside, but there's always something that's supporting initiatives, programs, efforts behind that.
100%. And you rightly mentioned that it seems to be sort of a buzzword now that we are having this next wave of the civil rights movement, and many companies are putting forth statements, but what do you do in a holistic way, in a sustainable way, to continue to uphold that value? Shakti, you said that you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think, you know, I was thinking about what Astad said, and it is really important to kind of dig deeper into that. It's, you know, what Astad said was really awesome, because that's how people need to think about digital transformation. That's how you need to think about how you adopt technologies. And one of the things that's really important is there is always going to be a business strategy for growth, and that strategy gets adjusted as you learn more about what is happening in the short term, but you always have a long-term strategy. The way to think about this is what Astad was alluding to, is the agile work. Something we did as a part of our digital transformation was set up a program called 90-90. 90 days of implementation and 90 days of ROI. So what we would do is we would work with the startup world, and all companies are technology companies these days, unfortunately, whether we like it or not. So we are working with the startup world, looking at all of these technologies that the VCs are investing into, and then understanding like Shark Tank and trying to figure out which are the ones that can help us in what we are trying to solve in the organization that we're in. And once we pick them, we would bring them in and give them the right support from an organization, whether it is procurement, technology, you know, HR, or whatever else support they need, and give them all of that support in a way that they can be successful if they put the right foot forward. So, you know, 90 days of implementation by a startup, then, you know, 90 days of ROI would then lead PepsiCo to then expand them across the globe. In that 90-90 program, we talked about this at another session I did, and we published something with Sapphire Ventures as well on that program. So those are the kind of agile sort of initiatives that people can do in bringing in technologies quickly into the company, testing them out. If they fail, they fail, you move on to the next one, but at least you are always continuously innovating yourself and staying ahead of the curve. And that's sort of, I think, where Astad was going in terms of agile nature of the work you need to do, but at the same time, it's all grounded in the global, you know, company strategic objectives.
Well, we'd be remiss if we weren't going to touch on, especially with rapid adoption, if we're talking about agile, we need to talk about privacy and security, because that has to be part of a strategy, especially when you're talking about people and you're gathering a lot of data about talent. So where do we stand on privacy and security with regards to AI tools? Joe, you're nodding your head vigorously, so I'm going to throw that one to you first.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's critically important, because privacy and data are key both to the candidate and also for the company. As you know, even Shakti was talking about, OCC compliance is one thing, making sure everyone's treated equally. There's a whole other level of making sure that your data is private, treated fairly, and also secure. And with GDPR, with CCPA, with everything that's coming out now, it's critical for organizations to work with technologies that focus on this at the forefront. And it's really hard to focus on it for startups, because I will tell you, as someone who runs a company that is luckily focused on this from the front, it's very difficult to do in the beginning because it's expensive and it takes a long time, and you don't get to go, oh, it's a flashy, cool part of my product. Like, there's no flashy, cool part of the product to make sure that you're compliant with security. We looked at it and said, we want to work already inside of the existing system. So when it came down to Censia, we focused specifically on integrating with already existing, you know, success factors, Workday, iSIMS, JobBite, IBM. So we enhance and extend their existing systems with AI directly inside there, so they don't have to, or customers don't have to learn a whole new system. They really don't want to do that. It's hard for adopting new systems that way. So because of that, we had the pressure of, you know, SAP said, you guys need to be premium certified to become a platinum partner for us. That was one of our bigger partners. It is still one of our bigger partners. And I remember going through that rigorous process. It took months. You know, there's lots of certifications on a security and privacy standpoint that technologies have to get. ISO certification is one of them. SOC 2 is another one. This helps organizations when evaluating technologies to know that they're secure and safe to have across their organization, that their data has been tested, that there are no breaches, that it's not going to all of a sudden, there's no reach into something that was not meant to be reached into. And so I think that this is something that for organizations and for companies, it's a really important question to ask. What happens, Censia has 550 million people on our platform. We have a lot of data. We process more than half of the data of Facebook every single day. So we see data from all of the different places that candidates put that data publicly. We're processing that, building intelligence around it, and really helping uncover the best talent for organizations. When we work with an organization, their data stays in a very secure place. And that's critical, that whenever you're working with the technology, that your own data does not get mixed in with their data or with other customers' data. Secondly, when a candidate's data is sitting inside of Censia, we've done everything to follow GDPR, CCPA, but what happens when that data leaves Censia and it goes into the system? Is there a clearance by the candidate? It's really important that that's asked. And that's a really big part of us, is when we pass data into any other system, we send out a consent notification to candidates automatically for them to consent that that data is allowed to be in there. But I think security and privacy are critical. If the organization hasn't spent a lot of time on that, it's something to be wary about. I agree both with Astad and with Shakti around deployments, because if they've done everything right on these things, they should be able to also spin up really quickly and deploy within the organization in an easy, seamless way, and giving everyone that confidence. But it's a really big game changer when it comes to evaluating technologies. You'll find you can filter a lot out because they haven't been able to spend that time and money and focus on security.
Manisha, maybe not as large a scale as what Joe is dealing with, but certainly Schneider has got a lot of people. So how do you approach privacy and security?
I think Joe covered a lot of points that, when you think about this, you have to think from both angles, enterprise angle and the employee angle. And Joe covered a lot in terms of assessment standards and ethical standard enterprise angle. At Schneider, we have an enterprise security, privacy teams. We have created frameworks which are very robust. So whenever we are considering bringing any new technology, and this is the paradox that Shakti and Astad were saying, we want to be agile, we want to move fast, but at the same time, we are very clear that we never want to compromise security or privacy. So if they become a barrier, then we slow down. So it's given that much priority, sometimes even above business criticality. So there's a little bit of tension there positively that we are holding because we want to hold ourselves to higher standards. From employee perspective, when we are making choice for these tools, we have to critically look at the design of the tools. So sometimes the design of the tool is completely, the power is a lot more in hand of algorithm. And sometimes the tools are designed in a way that humans are in the loop. So as an employee, beyond consent, I still have probability to influence the algorithm. For example, I'll go back to the same example that I've been saying for internal search, talent search. When you're looking at a couple of players in the market, some players had algorithms which were more like HR assessment tools. So you have skills, here is a profile, I'll do a matching, and boom, you have some ranked people. Employee had absolutely no say in those algorithms. And when we made a choice, we selected this design of algorithm where, as an employee, even though I'm in HR today, I can indicate that my future goal is digital marketing. And I'm looking at something very different from where I am. So the algorithm will consider not just my past experience, my current skill, but also my future hope and aspiration. So this context of what I am designing for and how broad-based and inclusive the design is, it takes into account human agency is so important. And when we take this to employees, we actually went to unions also to explain them that we're bringing this for internal talent search and what does it mean and are you on board? And even employee privacy notices contain this information. We don't have to explain them, but we did create a basic explanation that what does this algorithm does, what attributes it takes into account, and how does it make a match so that you'll be searched. And if you find a role for which you haven't heard, you can still have a human request loop available. So absolutely independent of technology. So taking into account those pieces, and at the end, like I said in past, ensuring that your product actually does self-audit. and your results are audited, and you look into account the fairness and explainability on a regular basis to ensure that, that it's taken care of properly.
So I'm glad you mentioned that bit about the human component, because that is also part of the strategy. Is how do you get people, not just HR professionals, but people all across the organization, to work with the AI, to collaborate with the AI. Astad, do you have some insight for us on that?
I mean, I would say that I'd love to understand the question a little bit better, Lydia. I mean, tell me, I mean, when you think about interact with the AI, is it like separately, or how are you thinking about that?
Well, because a lot of times people think that automation and AI are going to eliminate their jobs. So they are perhaps reluctant to use tools that may somehow uncover something that they're not able to do as well. So you have to teach people to collaborate with the machine learning.
No, I think that that's a very fair comment and a fair concern as well, right? I mean, I can tell you a lot of times, in our TA world, there's been this kind of work around saying, can the TA, I mean, I was part of conversations 5 years ago. Do we want to outsource talent acquisition? Do you have an RPO company that just does all of it and, just gives you a service, and, that company will do a whole bunch of things. I think personally, in my view, I'm seeing a comeback where companies are realizing the value of a strategic TA organization, talent acquisition organization, and they're seeing the value of a strategic recruiter and a sourcer. Personally, in my view, I think AI has come a long way, and I think that the future is very clearly there. But for me, AI is going to be one more of those tools that actually helps and enhances a great recruiter or sourcer do their job even better, right? For me, I don't see AI becoming, a robot where you're like literally talking to somebody else, but it's like about, hey, when I'm thinking about screening, right? How do I do that better? Like when we talk about Tradeify, you're getting tools that just improve that decision-making capability. And the fact is that TA functions, like every other function, have been squeezed. So we have been asked to do a lot with resources which have pretty much remained the same, which is where I think that actually AI tools, a lot of it which has come up. I mean, another one, for example, that I really love is Bright Hire. This is a new startup in Silicon Valley. And what this tool simply does is it actually just is a speech recorder. So when you're interviewing a candidate online, it literally transcribes the entire speech, and then it scans through the speech and picks up key, competencies, things about compensation, etc., and it actually pushes it back onto you. As a recruiter, imagine the amount of time that I'm spending right now making notes and then reviewing through notes versus what, transcribing it and then, analyzing it through AI can do for me. And particularly as a company, when I look at patterns of, hundreds of interviews and what I could do there. So I clearly see, like Joanna spoke clearly about how much volume is being generated. And I think AI is becoming a great way of just kind of compressing that data and giving us more tools around it. Personally, I think the best of us, we don't actually we're not threatened by AI, but we're also conscious of what the limitations of AI are, right? You spoke about diversity very early on. I think, in AI, it's all about the data sets that you spoke about, number one, and number two is the algorithms. And I'm almost a little bit more careful about the algorithms, because algorithms can be based on archetypes or stereotypes. And based on where the research really goes in, because too much AI is like, oh, I found a trend and let's use it, without studying the actual aspects of that trend on stereotypical data versus, broad data. And that's where that whole conscious clash between good diversity and good AI comes in.
Great. I want to pause briefly here because we are at the top of the hour. So we are approaching the time where we take questions from the audience, and bring Steve back on first though.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for participating. We are talking about how we can use tech to make the talent search more efficient and fair. Our sponsors are Censia and Fairygodboss. Thanks to them again. At this point, we'll be taking some questions from our audience. Use the Q&A function, and Lydia will pick them out and pose them to our speakers. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve. So yeah, we are definitely at an inflection point, and I want to explore the boundary between human and AI, but I do also want to get to our audience questions. Eunice is asking, how can talent acquisition tools assist in fairly assessing applicants that may not be technologically savvy or where English is their second language? How can it help combat pigeonholing diverse applicants into certain positions? For example, hiring primarily Hispanics for custodian positions. Who would like to start with that one?
I can start while somebody else is thinking about an answer.
One second, we need to, before you start, Astad, if you wouldn't mind muting the mic.
Sorry. So while Jo is applying her thinking on this, I will just start saying this is the very good problem situation where AI can become a limiting factor. You know, AI by itself is not a solution. The solution really lies in the human aspect of sourcing, understanding where my Hispanic sources are, what kind of hiring tools is more relevant for them, and then using that to bring the data into your ecosystem. So, and I'm very much aware that AI, you know, like Watson took many years to move from English to 3 new languages. You know, I think they stayed with English for quite some time. So having AI which translate other languages easily, but Spanish is the language I think everybody is working on because I work with lots of these AI tools. But it will remain a challenge. This is really a talent acquisition strategy to identify the source and say, okay, for this source, none of my video hiring tool or AI-based algorithm is working. So let me create a human funnel here. That could be a way to solve it.
Does anyone have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, and one that, you know, in general, I think lots of diversity groups are secluded out of opportunities for roles because of the limiting data factor. For example, something, you know, that's really key to us is how much certain demographics of data don't share certain data, or the data isn't translated into most technologies, especially keyword technologies, which it says, you know, I do this, and when that's not translated well and the organization says, I want this, there's just a mismatch. Like that talent that might have that is not there. I'll give you a good example. Women, which is a demographic, women put 40% less skills on their resumes and profiles than men. And if you're in a keyword search system and you're typing in keywords and you're looking for talent, or you're using AI to filter through that hasn't factored in or understood that, naturally what's going to happen is you're going to get a very limited diverse pool. And that's the same things with Hispanics. That's the same thing with people of color. They all have their nuances. What we looked at was saying, how can we help infer that data and help level that up? You know, if you're I'll give you a great example. If you're an enterprise salesperson, you can say, as a skill, business to business sales. You can also say corporate sales or B2B sales or enterprise sales. There's lots of ways you can say, there are literally hundreds of ways you can say the one skill of business to business sales. And if it's a keyword search system, think about it like Excel. It's only going to show you exactly what you asked for. And so that naturally leads to a funneling down. But AI, especially AI that has focused on this, is clustering that data to help infer the data that's missing by giving this is equal to this. It's just math, right? AI is math. Algorithms are math. And so you go, this is equal to this is equal to this, or this has a certain closeness to this other word, and therefore is really able to help uncover some of those demographic bias and not, you know, always push Hispanics into custodian jobs for sure, because it's going to help up level that. I just did a webinar yesterday with the former president of Mexico, President Fox, and we were talking specifically to CHROs of Latin America around how this has been a big focus of ours, even in Hispanic countries, is doing that, is making sure that we're able to grab the data that maybe is missed in other systems.
One of the things that, you know, mentioned this earlier and made me think about when you mentioned Watson and how long it really took to evolve. I think participation is key. when I think about Shakti saying the 90-90, that resonated with me when I think about some of the apprehensions that we might have to be early adopters, to be participants. I really think it's important. And I don't know, I can't see the audience, but I'm just guessing based on the numbers that there are probably some leaders or their individual contributors push for participation. I think technology requires participation to be able to evolve and to grow. And I think that it's important. Not that we all want to have adverse situations, but we need to participate. And I think AI will grow. I mean, applicant tracking systems, platforms, all of the tools that we use now, once upon a time, not all organizations were using them. They grew and developed because of participation. And as we get more adopters of technology, I think then we all benefit from the technology's improvement and from us being able to rid these technologies of some of the adverse impact that it might have, or things that we need more data, we need more participation. So that's what I would encourage, is if you're thinking about AI, you're thinking about technology, understanding there are budgetary constraints, there's time constraints, there's people implementation constraints, but participation is key. And I think that we all benefit if we can all try and participate into the next wave of the technology that will help us all.
I'm always thinking about the future of work, and we have a perfect storm now of this work from home revolution, even though it was foisted on us by the pandemic. And one of the attendees is kind of the same mind, asking about how you change techniques for recruiting when geography doesn't matter as much as it did before. Is there any change to the way that you would recruit, or are you just going about it the same way? Shakti?
I would say a lot has changed. I mean, we have gone 10 years forward in 6 months in terms of leveraging technology, to Keller's point, using technology, and being able to understand what work from home can do for us. And a lot of organizations I have been talking to, they're basically saying that they probably will only bring back 40 to 50% of the employees that are working from home, because they figured out that it works and they don't have to have them in a real estate for which they're paying a lot of money. People are wasting time, and a lot of people are happy. When the pandemic began, it was about 20 to 30% of the people who would say, I want to go back to work. Now, only 40% of the people say, I really want to go back to work. So, you know, over the past 4 or 5 months, even the sentiments have changed. So what it does is it opens up the talent pool for you across the globe. Does it really matter where work from home is? Are you in New York or you are in London? Does it really matter? It doesn't. Even for my small company, and I use Censia to find my people all the time. It takes me seconds. And what I end up doing is I'm hiring people all across the globe for the work that we're doing on our startup. And that not only reduces our cost, but it reduces the time to hire. And the amount of talent pool that is available across the globe is just awesome. So I think this has really turned things on its head. I was looking at the question that people were asking, and one of the questions on the similar line was, what about furloughed workers and what about other workers? There are all kinds of people now looking for jobs. And one of the things that, you know, I admire Censia for doing this, they provided what's called the Ready to Hire program, in which every organization can participate. If they furlough people, they get people laid off, or they want to hire people who've been furloughed and laid off, then they can work with Censia for free and not cost a penny, and get their people in the search for companies that are searching using Censia Engine to be able to search the furloughed and laid off people first, and then look at the others. So there's ways that people are helping other people to do different things, and there are so many such initiatives. This is just one of them. But it's an important way of thinking about this, because your talent pool is now global, and that changes the whole dynamics. That would be my perspective. I'm sure others have much to add to this as well.
Yeah, I did want to talk about the potential pool of furloughed and displaced workers. If Astad, Manisha, or Kellen has some insight.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'd like to build on what Shakti said, particularly in terms of, the future of work in the world of work, right? Our CEO made a statement once these implications of the COVID crisis came in to say that commercial real estate is probably not a very good long-term business to be sitting in, right? And couldn't be more true. I can tell you some practical examples of what's happened here at Experian as well, right? For us, we prided ourselves as a company which had a lot of workplace flexibility. Right? So now you've got the ability to come into office when you wanted to, leave whenever you wanted to. But I think the COVID crisis has taken it to a whole new level. And I would say that the biggest challenge has actually been in places like, for example, call centers, which traditionally were seen as, oh, you've got to have this group of people sitting in a call center and taking these calls over there. All of a sudden, and we've been debating about, can we do a remote working call center for maybe about 3-4 years before, and COVID crisis made that made that reality within 3 weeks. So some points you have to ask yourselves, what were the what sacred cows did the companies have that they were not willing to consider that a complete workforce can work remotely? And just as Shakti said, I mean, in our case, almost 90% of our people prefer to work from home now. So, it's really kind of that movement which is going to be building in. Now, there's also one of the things that I think our profession is going to have to come through is that there is differences, right? Those who are in manufacturing organizations, they can't work from home in the same way that an IT or financial services can, right? I'm sure in Joanna's organization, a lot of them can, work remotely. In AI, you can't do that when you're in the service industry. You can't do that if you're in a restaurant business. You can't do that somewhere else. And I think, if anything, the COVID crisis is actually creating almost a different class set of workers, who can be a lot more remote, can be a lot more flexible, doesn't matter where they're going to be. And the implications of what that has on locations like San Francisco, where you hear about the brain drain that's going out of the Bay Area, the brain drain I'm sure, Lydia, you see some of that in New York as well, where a lot of New Yorkers, I was talking to a colleague of mine who just moved from New York to Florida because he said, guess what? I'm going to, I don't need to pay that kind of rent and I'm getting double the space in Florida. So I think there's huge societal implications. To be honest, right now, I can only take some estimated guesses, but I think that we're just at a cusp of seeing what this crisis will really play out with.
I fully agree with that. I think there is a lot that is yet to be seen. Real estate markets outside of New York, where I live, is going crazy as well. I'm getting calls from real estate agents whether I want to sell my house or not. It's not even in the market. So it is going crazy. There's a lot of implications to this, to Astad's point. And I think that will also change on how you hire the talent and what kind of talent you hire. Because engagement becomes a really difficult thing. And so does diversity. And it is changing the whole map of diversity, inclusion, and engagement. And those are areas that are really important. And that's why some engines in AI that can take money away from acquisition and put it more into strategic advantage will help a lot. And there are some use cases that I think Joe can allude to for the work that they've done for some companies, where you've taken money completely out of the front end and then take that money and invest it back into the back end process of intelligence rather than just recruiting. So, things are going to change and these priorities are going to change every day. We can talk about this topic all day. I'm sure, Lydia, there's other questions.
I do. And yeah, this is the thing with this topic is there's so many layers and it's so easy to just spend a whole lot of time on one thing, but I do want to try to get to as many of these as we can. With regards to the shifting priorities of talent as they consider prospective employers, can AI suss that out? Manisha, you had said something about, how it susses out skills. So is this something that you're using at Schneider?
So can you rephrase that question for me, Lydia?
Can AI tell you about the shifting priorities of talent as they consider prospective employers, or in your case, as they consider moving up in the company?
Yes, I think a lot of, I'm also trying to work on MIT Future of Work Task Force and some other Aspen Institute. A lot of these government bodies are also trying to create some kind of front end where people can put in the jobs that they're trying to aspire for, and they can then, those platforms can guide, okay, these are the skills needed. And, I can also enter my skills, and then the platform can say, adjacent to the skills I have, which are the new jobs I can look for. So yes, there are already some such platforms which exist. And in context of Schneider, what we implemented internally, we call it gig economy or open talent market. This is what our tool is doing to employees. It's actually telling Manisha, you have these skills, these are adjacent roles, these are the buckets you have indicated. So careers you are interested in, careers people like you are interested in. So it gives me both the opportunities, and it also tells me that if I want to apply for those jobs, what are the skills I need to further build in. So it's kind of career GPS, we call it, which helps me saying, if you want to reach there, here are the 2 projects, 1 mentor that you can network with and get there.
But in your experience, can the HR talent acquisition professionals use the AI to identify those people?
Yes, they can, because this is to your human question, that when AI takes up this volume of data and creates these checkpoints and decision matrix, then recruiters have a much more strategic view. They are not just looking at 10 vacancies, and against those 10 vacancies, 10 candidates each they can actually zoom in and zoom out in a very, very agile way and look at the strategic talent mobility. Like if these are the 10 critical skills within talent, within Schneider, where are these skills moving? And which are the buckets which are completely empty when nobody is not at all interested. So they have a very strategic viewpoint of talent. And in this COVID time, there are 3 kinds of strategy. One, what Shakti and Astad said, that talent will become geography independent, hopefully. So that will be the positive change. But other is we are hiring cautiously, right? So our recruiters have time right now to look at this strategic talent roadmaps and look at building the talent pipeline. So they are proactively looking at critical skill, talent gaps, and building these pipelines for the future.
Manisha, I think what you said is really key, and especially as organizations are looking at making these decisions at a higher level than, okay, I have a job, I know exactly what that job is, and I know exactly the type of person I want. With COVID, that has completely shaken up too. People don't really know what they need or what they're going to need in 12 months from now. And so I have a great example. One of our clients, large organization, they came to us and they said, this is like day 1, we're in a demo, and this goes to evaluating technologies too. They said, hey, we don't know, 1, what skills our people have. We also need to move people from one division that is growing rapidly, from those that are declining into areas that are growing rapidly. We don't want to lose good people. We want to make sure they're moved into the right roles. We also have a huge priority as the organization on AI. And from the very first moment, we were able to look down. They have 78,000 employees. We already in our system had 72,000 of those people. So we knew exactly what skills they had. We're able to look down, top down on top of the organization and say, if you move these people from this department to this department, and these people from this department to this department, your AI capabilities are going to shoot up. But now let's cross-reference that with your top 3 competitors. Now, if you're in HR and you're going to the boardroom, imagine this conversation where you go, I'm looking at me and I'm looking at my top 3 biggest competitors, and I want to see exactly in 5 seconds what people are great at AI and machine learning from those organizations. And they haven't purchased anything. There's no integration. We don't have their data. We're looking at our data, which is the data that's out there on talent, and saying, if you grab these people from those 3 organizations, you move them into your organization, move these people across your organization, not only will you hit par with those organizations in AI and machine learning, you will surpass them and become by far a leader. Now you're having a conversation at such a strategic level, the board's going to sit there and be like, how do you know this, right? It's a very different conversation. So that's the power of where we are today. to look at that and take the step back, I think Shakti's totally right. We just massively put our foot on the gas on where we want to be, and we're able to make much better decisions. And I love how much care people like Schneider Electric are taking thought in their own people to say, we want to make sure our good people are taken care of, and look at that on a strategic level.
On a related note, I know the answer to this question, but it definitely bears repeating. Could AI predict where the talent shortages are going to be as the economy comes back in a different way?
I think you already said you know the answer. It is yes. It's a supply-demand question, and I mean, Joe just gave a really good example of what Censia can do with the data that they have and give you that intelligence, and that's the same intelligence you can get for the resources that are available in the market. And the economy is going to come back differently, and so you can quickly, within seconds, with companies like Censia, figure out where that talent is and where the shortages are. So I think that's an inherent, advantage of AI.
We have another that is, Astad mentioned AI tools that do the first level of screening before you bring in human interactions, but actually all of you mentioned some things. So I think it bears repeating again, which of these tools have the panel used and what have been the pros and cons? And so we can do just a quick recap for this curious attendee. Kellen, did you want to start with that Tradeify example?
Yeah, what was the question, Lydia? I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Well, we're just going to do a quick roundup of the AI tools that do the first level of screening, and those that have been mentioned already.
Oh, okay.
So Tradeify, an assessment tool that looks at personality based on those that you have in your organization, those that are in that profession, and then those who've applied or candidates.
So at Schneider, we use HireView for video screening, at the sourcing and screening level. And for this internal open talent market that I talked about, we use Gloat, Gloat, Gloat. It's an Israeli product company, and we are the top 3 users. I think it's catching up in the market. Yeah, I think those are the two. We are working with iSIMS as our TA talent acquisition tool, and we plan to use the entire suite, so they use AI in the candidate experience, in the chatbot piece, in the sourcing, screening, and recruiter intelligence piece. So iSIMS is the one that we're currently in the process of implementing.
I think as an advisor to Censia, I will request everybody to use Censia, because that's going to not only reduce your cost tremendously, but also give you the intelligence that you need. I have looked at so many tools during our digital transformation. There's a lot of tools that do a great job in their niche areas, but when you look at overall talent acquisition with intelligence and not pay prices that LinkedIn and other companies that are demanding, millions of dollars for recruitment, you'll be able to quickly not only home in on the talent that you need, but not have to write a job description ever again. So there's a lot of advantages, and I'm sure Joe will talk about that. But as an advisor, I'd say just buy Censia. That was a plug I had to do. I'm sorry.
He should be wearing a T-shirt. I want to make sure Astad gets a chance to chime in.
Yeah, I think these are some good tools. We've been experimenting with a few right now. I haven't found something that I would say is, perfectly got to our screening as yet. So we're actually doing some testing as we speak right now, putting it out there. And then at that point of time, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable, really talking about even recommending some of the tools that I would say that these can really screen. At this stage, the ones I talk about are the ones that I've tried out, and I would say, yes, these really pass the muster.
Great, thank you. So we're coming up to the bottom of the hour here, so I just want to do a sort of speed round with this last question, because it is very future of work focused. With AI becoming more and more efficient, how do you view the role of the recruiter in the future? Joe, let's start with you. Everybody's going to get a chance to answer this one.
Yeah, I think that the role of the recruiter actually going to get to the level that they deserve to be at. When I started Censia, I traveled to over 100 countries, and I sought out some of the best leaders of organizations I could find to ask them a couple questions before I started Censia. I wanted to know what their most valuable asset was, their biggest problem, and their biggest fear. And what was crazy is across thousands of people, 100 countries, they pretty much said the same thing for all three of those, which was talent. They said, my greatest asset's my people. My biggest challenge is finding great people. And I'm afraid that if I don't find great people, I won't be able to survive for the future. And what that indicated to me was that the talent organization is the most powerful department in the organization, because they are the conduit to which top talent come into and stay inside the organization, or evolve inside the organization. And that's the case with HR as well. And so I think at the end of the day, they are more powerful than ever, because they're not going to be looked at. AI is going to help them not be looked at as just manual, mundane workers that are, hands-on keyboard time, but really helping with the strategic thought. And I believe, and a huge part of what we focus on is getting them in the boardroom to help make those decisions from the front end as we're doing our financial planning every year as organizations.
Shakti, next.
I'll twist this question a little bit, because I think we have to address the elephant in the room. Every time you do digital transformation, the maximum cost reduction comes from reduction of people. And I want to be really clear that as you automate, as you use more and more AI and other tools, it's not that you don't need talent recruitment, folks in the business. You just need different kind of skill set. And people who are in the recruitment function must continuously educate themselves to be relevant. And if I'm doing all the work and screening 4 candidates a day, and suddenly a system comes in that gives me, screening capabilities of 400 candidates a day, do I need the same number of recruiters in the company? So that will change, and there is no question about it. The question is, how do they continuously evolve themselves, educate themselves, and bring them up to speed so they can apply a higher level of skill set than the one they are doing today. And yes, the recruitment function is going to change. It's going to be smaller, but it's going to be much more intelligent. And I think that equation is really important to think about. Having said that, I think every organization that does digital transformation must keep in mind that the talent doesn't have to be reduced. You need to think about the turnover in the company and leverage that to your advantage as you move talent around and reskill them to do different jobs in the organization. So I think there are various ways of looking at talent, but the recruitment teams definitely will get impacted with the use of AI.
Kellen, future of the recruiter?
I definitely agree with what I've heard so far. I think there's definitely more strategic power that talent acquisition organizations internally are going to provide. I think of technology as really taking away some of those tasks, but I don't want to forget about, at least me personally, what drew me into talent acquisition. That was the people component. And I think talent acquisition's technologies and the technology that is supporting talent acquisition will take away some of those non-people components, but I think the people component will still be there. I think the talent acquisition will still be part of representing the companies that you're working at. I think they'll still be a part of carrying candidates through a positive journey. They'll still be a part of working internally to move talent around as well. And so I think technology will help eliminate some of those time draining activities. We'll be able to drive efficiency, but I still think that the basic component of talent acquisition, recruiting people to people, will still be there. And I think that the technology will help give back some of that time that people can then really truly bring people through an effective journey and to be able to effectively represent and sell the organization that they work for.
Manisha, do you agree?
I agree with what all three panelists have said. Starting with Joe, I want to repeat that talent acquisition people, you have the swagger because you get the talent to the organization, and talent helps create winning organizations. So we be very proud of it. And like what Shakti and Kellen said, the human components will remain while technology will take away mundane part of the work. The point that I want to leave is in the future of talent, look at the candidate interview experience, the relationship management, the strategic talent viewpoint, the capability matrix. None of the recruiters were looking at this few years back. As technology started taking the mundane work, more and more complex strategic work started originating on talent acquisition horizon. So now the talent acquisitions teams can play that strategic game really well and can really guide business into this digital transformation. You can really, while agile and changing in the moment is important, it's also important to hold a little bit of longer talent and skills roadmap and help organization pivot. So I think recruiters will increasingly become talent influencers, talent strategists, and will increasingly have a boardroom play.
Thank you. Astad, I'm sorry, but you got 30 seconds to add anything?
No, I mean, I think the group addressed it well. I just think that we are still years away from AI actually making a hiring decision. So a hiring decision is still going to be made by a hiring manager and a recruiter. What's going away is the process-oriented part of it, the paper pushing and the process and let me do that. That's going away. All that can be done by better tools, and AI can give a lot of more information. But I still think that the value of a really good recruiter who makes the decision, the call, and I think that value doesn't go away.
Thank you. Well, that's our time. I'll invite Steve back on to take us out.
Thank you, Lydia, and our wonderful speakers. That was a great conversation. Thank you again to Censia and Fairygodboss and to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. Tuesday, September 1st, we're talking about how employees can embrace meaning in their work. Thursday, September 10th, fostering a community while working remote. And just last week, we did our first full-scale virtual conference a while back with panel discussions, workshops, and networking. It was amazing, and we'll be doing our next one in September. Visit our website to learn more. Thanks, everyone. Be well.